All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third live video of 6 vulnerable conversations between a woman and a man. I know, and it's so interesting, Rob. I'm like, wow, how unconventional. I am the woman, and I am holding the container for both of us. And just even noticing, like, wow, this feels edgy, but I love it.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me feel powerful. So this evening, we're going to be going into a very interesting conversation of masculine versus feminine integrity. And this concept was actually something that you, Rob, brought to my attention a while back. For those of you who don't know, both me and Rob and I do relationship coaching. Rob also does other sorts of coaching, but he and I have tag teamed on some couples coaching before. And he brought up this concept of masculine versus feminine integrity, which just really turned me on, because for me, integrity is so important to me. And if I feel like I'm out of integrity in any of my relationships, I get this really kind of intense, nauseous feeling. This feeling of like, oh, like as much as I am imperfect, I desire to be this perfect being who is in integrity all the time. And Rob kind of pointed out this thing of like, well, your form of integrity can actually be another person's form of being out of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So this evening, we're going to go into the conversation of the difference between masculine and feminine integrity. What is it? How do those things collide? And in this paradoxical situation where both people can be right, how do we find the point of connection there?
Hi.
How'd I do, Rob? Did I?
That was awesome.
Well, it was good.
I felt very held. I appreciated it.
Oh, good. I want you to feel held.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to define a few things. So we're going to use the word masculine and feminine a lot during this episode, and just know that masculine and feminine does not mean men and women. Masculine and feminine is 2 different energies that exist in all human beings in some certain ratio. I call it the masculine-feminine ratio. Some women I know are more masculine than me. Some men I know are more feminine than you, and that's okay. It's just who we are, and truly, that part of ourselves. And our masculine-feminine ratio also adjusts, sometimes slightly during the day, moment by moment, circumstance by circumstance. But over time, men might not be in touch with their feminine, and then really get in touch with it and go all the way to the other end of the spectrum. So just know it's an evolving thing that happens in all of us.
Exactly. And that there's nothing like, I think for it's possible that for a lot of man to say when we like the man's embodying his feminine, I feel like there can be some kind of negative association with that has to do with our culture, if like, stigmatizing whatever it's homophobia or men being effeminate. And my desire is for this conversation is for men to really embrace the more feminine aspects of them, and women to embrace more of the masculine aspects of them as well.
Well, here's my charged viewpoint. If you don't embrace your opposite side, it's dumb. It's not you're dumb. It's just dumb, because certain circumstances require the other. And if you're not in agreement or not in touch, then you miss out on having the optimized ratio, and then you're losing opportunity. So like one example was and I make mistakes all the time around this, just not to sound like I'm superhuman, but so I was having a conversation with Morgan, and she was blah, 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 talking. And then as soon as she was done, I was like, okay, well, this is how we fix it. This is the masculine side of how to fix it. And then her face got askew. And I'm like, what? She's like, I actually just wanted you to validate my feelings. And I was like, oh, like I led with my masculine. Well, what she truly wanted was my feminine, my reception, my ability to hear. So it was a valuable lesson for me to know that I don't even have to be, I get to be in touch with this other superpower that I have to provide a really good response to the circumstance.
Yeah, and that makes me want to bring up a side comment, which is probably the first chargey conversation of the evening, which we won't get too depthfully into. But the flip side for women like especially with everything that's happening around the Me Too movement and like our relationships with men, you know, my experience is that we as women need to have a really healthy relationship with the masculine energy that exists within us, that really solid, kind of strong part of us that can set clear boundaries so that we can actually have healthier relationships with like men in our lives. And especially around, you know, the whole, like, there's this part of us, there's this damsel in distress in women that wants to be saved, you know. Disney told us that we should fall in love with Prince Charming and ride off into the sunset, and that he was the answer to our prayers. And for so much of us as women, like the more we can like really cultivate a healthy relationship with our own masculinity, I find the more that we're able to have really empowered and like rich relationships with men.
True. And for men, it's the flip. It's like women want your masculine side, and some women want it more than others, but they really want you connected to your masculine. But, you know, I don't think relationships will exist for long-term healthily if a man doesn't have some connection to his feminine. Sometimes women just want you to freaking listen. So, you know, embody your feminine, be receptive. And maybe we need to define what masculine and feminine means to both of us, but be in your feminine, be receptive, and feel them, because that's sometimes what they want. And if you don't do it, they're out the door.
Yeah. Why don't we do that? Because the whole masculine feminine polarity thing is such a elusive conversation. So what is your definition of masculine and feminine, Rob?
I have several. And I think the most baseline definition I have is that the masculine is projectile, it's movement, it's forward motion, it's action. Feminine on the flip side is receptive, it's receiving, it's bringing in, it's embracing. That's the baseline definition, how I tend to think of masculine and feminine.
Awesome. I am a yes to both of those things. And the other thing that I'll add on to that, which can be counterintuitive but also not, is I find that the masculine is kind of the steady, kind of like solid rock that so many women I think are unconsciously desiring, so that their feminine, kind of the flowy, like emotional, volatile, surrendered aspect of them can surrender. So to me, along with what you said, the masculine is kind of like the sturdy stake in the ground, and the feminine is kind of the flag that is attached to the stake and is able to kind of like flap around in its like creative emotional flow, as you can see by my hands.
Flow. Well, I mean, totally. I mean, the masculine, another definition for me, masculine likes simple, concise, contained, crossing things off the to-do list, tidy. The feminine is like, woo, what else can we open up? Or what other can we explore? What else can we see? And so the feminine wants to open up and expand, and while the masculine wants to contain. And in every circumstance, there's moments to expand and see, and there's, you know, like, okay, I'm trying to start a business on one topic, and you connect it to your feminine, you see the possibility, you dream, you vision, you create. But if you stay in that dream visioning state, nothing gets done. And so then you call on your masculine, or hire someone like me, and to help you contain and then actually move in the masculine to have those dreams come into baseline reality.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing that I tend to see, both that I've witnessed in myself and in the world around me, is that when there is an imbalance of masculine and feminine, and it's different for everyone. Like you could look at percentages, like maybe one person's like 60% feminine and 40% masculine or whatever it is. But when we like resist or repress or push away one aspect of the ratio, inevitably the other one is going to be imbalanced as well. So it's not that one is good and the other is bad, but that we need to find right relationship with both, and that we're not always going to be in our feminine. We're not always going to be in our masculine. But if we push one of them away or make it wrong, inevitably the other one's going to suffer in some way.
Right. And well, in society, there is a lot of people who have negativity about their polar opposite. I was talking to a woman who, frankly, was abused and raped as a child. And so she was so deeply in her feminine. And I could feel that softness and that warmth. But then she's like, wow, your masculinity is really hard for me to be around. Because she was so hurt by a man, these gentle-eyed masculine with a man, she rejected me, which I wasn't offended. I was just like, okay, do you want me to sit back? Do you want me to be more my feminine? And then she started talking about how she can't move in her life. She can't sustain a job or even sustain a relationship. And she really got, through our conversation, it's because she's rejecting her own masculine.
Yeah. And, along with when you asked in the first call, like, why are we doing this? Other than the fact that you just enjoy hanging out with me, I feel like one of the reasons that I know that I'm doing is so that we can, like, it doesn't have to be this black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Just as it doesn't need to be a black and white between our masculine and feminine, so it doesn't need to be a black and white between men and women.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning men are not always inherently wrong, just as women are not always inherently right. And in fact, we can really honor that, like, how this man feels to him feels really true.
Mm-hmm.
And how this woman feels is really true.
Mm-hmm.
And even if those feelings clash, it doesn't mean that we have to make the person across from us wrong. And that's where, like, looking to really understand the perspective can be really helpful, which leads us really beautifully into this I see you holding your breath. Was there something you wanted to say?
No, keep going.
Awesome. So this leads us really beautifully into our conversation this evening of masculine versus feminine integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So now we kind of get to explore, like, what is the difference between masculine versus feminine integrity? And, in this kind of paradoxical way where two things can be true at the same time that don't feel like they should, how do we find connection there? And before we do, why don't we create a definition of what integrity means, Rob? Like, what does integrity mean to you in the context of, like, relationship?
Integrity means, it's kind of old school. It's like, do as you say as you do. And it's also what's on your inside matches what's on your outside. Mm-hmm. We are magnificent actors portraying a role or creating a facade of who we think the world wants us to be. And the inside is very often very different. So we tend to be out of integrity with ourselves because we present something or someone that we're truly not. And the effect of that is that we lack the ability to be connected to ourselves. And we really compromise our own views due to that lack of integrity.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I feel like I would just add, some synonyms. Like, to me, integrity also means alignment or congruity. So similar to what you said, is like how I present myself is congruent with how I show up, how I feel and express, like, internally is my personal integrity is how I feel, and what I believe internally is in integrity with how I express myself and act externally.
Dig it. Agreed. Like it.
Sweet.
So
why don't we go into the different types of integrity? So why don't we start with gentlemen first? Oh, I'm sorry, but it's not gentlemen, it's the masculine.
True.
But we can let you share first. What is your definition of what does masculine integrity mean to you?
Well, let me diverge for a second and say, my teachers, old school. I mean, my original teachers taught the work of Victor Barranco, who started Moore University, and he was a researcher in the 60s and 70s, and then his work propagated to a lot of other groups. And so one of the things that I learned from them was that women don't have integrity. Yeah. Just for the record, this is not my viewpoint, but this was the viewpoint that I was taught. And boy, the women in the room didn't like that the first time they heard that women don't have integrity. And the reasoning behind that was because men created the boys' school, or the patriarchy, and women weren't invited to the party. And so the rules that men and boys, really boys, learned, the women didn't have the chance to learn. and what men were taught or what men learned was very different. So women were like, you're not inviting me to the party, I'm not going to follow your rules, I'm not going to follow what you're doing. And so it was as a good student, I took on that viewpoint for a while, and got me into a lot of trouble with women, especially when I said it, and I used to say it in a charged, slightly obnoxious manner. I've learned. But what I did learn, or what I did pick up from that, was they are really different. They have very different aspects and different relationships. And so, when I was married, when I would say, what time do you want to leave? And she would say 8:00. To me, that meant be ready by 7:58. When she said, I want to leave by 8, she actually thought about leaving at 9, and would just, she had a different relationship to that time. So I could look at that like, oh, she's out of integrity with time. She said 8, and now it's 9, and we're not leaving till 9:15. And then I realized that us leaving at 9:15 was the right time to go, because getting there the hour early wasn't right. She was actually in touch with a deeper truth than my stoic, masculine man saying we have to leave at 8. So I learned that, even though she said 8:00 in legal baseline abstraction terms, that was, what it meant. It really meant, let's go to the party when the party is the right time for us to go in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I feel like I was very connected to masculine integrity for the majority of my young adult life. It's really only been for the past maybe 3 or 4 years that I've been embracing feminine integrity, which we'll speak to later on. But there is something about like the rightness of masculine integrity, something about like, I'm gonna do this because I said that I did it, like that I'm going to do it, and if I don't do it, that means that I'm a bad person.
Right.
Or there is something about like I was very like I'm like negativizing this, but like I was very kind of like clenched, or like desiring to be in control and like the precision of things. And what I've noticed is like I actually fall way more into what you're describing, short of showing up on time for my clients. But I more and more have kind of slipped away from like, I said I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it like this no matter what, even if it no longer feels in alignment with what's true in the moment. And I look at, like, I'm still in judgment around some of those things, that I've become more loose around those areas.
Well, I think you're out of integrity, masculine or feminine. You're out of integrity when you say you're going to do something, you change your mind, you don't tell the other people that you don't want to do it, and then you don't show up. So for some who are rigid in terms of masculine integrity, in other words, if we want to start defining masculine integrity, it's be your word almost to the point of your own detriment, like do what you say, even if you don't want to do it or it's not healthy, no pain, no gain. That edge of the level is that I'm going to do what I say. So my classic example is I decided to do 70 yoga classes in 80 days to prepare for my talk at Lightning in a Bottle. And so I made myself a spreadsheet. I talked about it, and that's a lot of, it's hot yoga too. It's core power. So it's hot yoga. And so I was going to do 70 yoga classes. That's 7 classes out of 8 days. And after day 30, I said, I'm going to die. I'm not going to make this. No, I'm going to die. And so then I had a conversation with myself and said, all right, 60 classes in 80 days. And that's what I did. And it was so much more pleasurable. I kept my goal. It was still impressive. But if I would have been purely my masculine side of the integrity, then I would have killed myself and not been good. So it's the loosening of that extreme edge that I think was necessary for my health.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like I want to take that and kind of bring it into an even more kind of like example in the realm of relationship, because one of the talking points that I wrote down was there can be kind of like the alchemized version of masculine integrity, and then there kind of be like kind of the shadowy version of that. And I just want to speak to a little bit of ways that I find masculine integrity can actually be used as a way to like perpetuate being a martyr, for example, or perpetuate being a victim.
Totally.
I having a conversation with a client maybe like a month ago or something like that, where she was in this toxic relationship with this man who was not treating her well. It was not a great relationship. And she would make all of these agreements with him about what she would do for him, whether it's like, oh, I'm going to pick him up, I'm going to do this. But she was more and more out of integrity with herself. And these things that she was committing to doing were actually going against her nature. But she was kind of using the excuse of, well, I said that I was going to do this, so I'm going to do it. But it's like, to me, that's an example of kind of holding on to masculine integrity as almost kind of like perpetuating, almost feeling disempowered around your choice to be empowered.
Right. So let's go back to our baseline definition. So if masculine likes to check things off the box and have really clean, then if you change your mind in the middle, or if she changed her mind in the middle and created a new thing, you're adding a new to-do list, you're away from masculine integrity. But to me, that's the side of the feminine integrity. When you have the choice, to alter, when you want to switch something around, you're still integrity with who you want to be in the world. And at the same time, you're in integrity with the change, your integrity with yourself, your integrity with your body.
Beautiful. Well, why don't we speak a little bit to the feminine integrity then? Because it sounds like we've spoken to masculine integrity, and then we start to fade into the reasons why you would shift, into a different model of integrity.
Okay. So feminine integrity really is following and changing and morphing and going with the flow. So like my 70 classes to 60 classes, that was not a sign of masculine integrity. If I made a blood agreement with my brothers that I was going to do that, I was out of integrity with them because I changed my mind. The feminine wants to change its mind. It wants the freedom to change its mind based on what's happening. And that's the beauty of the feminine. You could look at, wow, I was planning to wear this outfit and it's totally wrong. Okay, I'm going to change. I was going to paint this picture, but you know what? I had this new flash of inspiration. I'm going to change this color, etc., etc. The feminine wants to change. It wants to evolve. It's where the beauty and the vision comes from. And so being integrity on the feminine side is listening to those loud voices that say, change, 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 and which drives the masculine crazy. Because we're like, no, you said this and this. Look, I have your signature, blah, 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 blah. But if the masculine's purely in its side, it's going to miss out on the opportunity of so much beauty.
Yeah. And I would dare say in this circumstance that feminine integrity, there's in many ways a lot less approval for feminine integrity than masculine integrity.
Well, masculine doesn't even think feminine integrity is a word or a statement. Purely in the masculine, that is an oxymoron, jumbo shrimp. Sorry.
Well, it's more like how about like intuitive action?
Oh, okay. What's that?
Like to me, that's another form of feminine integrity. We'll get into the example that I have later, but it's like what you're talking to, like, I'm acting based upon what feels true in the moment. Like I'm actually at this place in my body where if I have to do something or I said yes to doing something that now thinking about doing it, it just like, it makes and it doesn't feel true anymore. It makes my body quake. Like it's very hard for me at this point to do things that do not feel in integrity. And I would actually say, because I pushed away my feminine, my intuition, my embodiment feeling in my body for so long, I'm actually really I'm kind of in the extreme in many ways of valuing feminine integrity over masculine integrity because I bypassed my emotions and my intuition for so long. And it's definitely gotten me into a little bit of trouble, especially when it comes to following my desire. I'll tell you that right now.
So are you a 51-49 feminine to masculine? Are you a 70-30 feminine, masculine? This, of course, is a very masculine question, but I want to get a flavor. Where are you in the spectrum?
I'd say I'm probably like 70% feminine integrity and 30% masculine integrity. And it's actually becoming a bit of like an issue now because my business has kind of exponentially increased over the course of the last month. And it's requiring me to re-engage with my masculine and integrity in a way that I've been resisting for a while. And I was joking with my coach about it. I was like, really, my resistance to creating a schedule and structure is that I'm resisting the patriarchy. And it's like kind of this rebellion of like, fuck you for telling me to do things that are based on no reason other than that I'm supposed to do them. And it's actually shown up as well in my relationship to food and my body. Like I find that like dieting, restricting calories for restricting calories' sake and eating things that we don't actually enjoy eating because we're supposed to. Like it's similar with that. Like I spent most of my college years very regimented in the foods that I would eat, like to a compulsive place, like entering it into calorie counters and just being obsessive with how many calories I was burning. And I realized like, oh my God, this is actually making me crazy. So it was a similar thing of like, I'm going to let this go and pendulate to the opposite side of the spectrum of like not doing any of that. And then cycling around so I actually find my unique right relationship with both.
Yeah. I mean, that's sometimes the way you have to do it. You have to start at one side and check out the other side and explore back and forth and until you do find a healthy relationship. I mean, my belief system of the mastery of integrity is the total switch on the number from all the way masculine to all the way feminine and back and forth in a conscious manner with a lot of communication. And that's, where I'm really living in my life. I have a lot of projects and I love having lots of projects and I love having, so much to do and so much expansion, but it's affecting my self-care. It's affecting my health. So now I have to bring in some more of my feminine integrity to live a healthier lifestyle. So when I do feel exhausted, I do feel tight, I do feel like I need a little space, it's time to go to the beach, for a day. It's time to go for a walk. It's time to get a massage. It's time to watch a movie. Instead of sticking like, no, this is my to-do list, it's finding the balance between the two.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
How about we take this into the juicy nitty-gritty of how masculine and feminine integrity shows up in our intimate relationships and some of our personal experiences around kind of the clashing of these two things.
Totally.
Awesome. Okay. So this comes, I've mentioned this a few times, but for me, my intimate and sexual relationships with men radically shifted when I was able to move from a right and wrong model of relating to being able to embrace paradox. And when I say paradox, I mean that two things can simultaneously be true for two different people at the same time that seem to not work together. But when I'm able to embrace that I feel a certain way and it feels really true to me, and this person across from me feels a certain way and feels really true to him, when I don't need to make myself right and himself wrong, then I can actually move out of trying to be right to really figuring out how can I be connected with this person? And how can I actually find the common thread where we do feel the same way or really like be heard in the same spots? And it's been uncomfortable navigating that because I get to look at where I'm out of integrity with my feminine integrity or where I'm out of integrity with my masculine integrity, and it gets messy.
Nothing like a relationship to push all your buttons.
Everything.
That's the definition of relationship, actually. Something to push your buttons. Totally. I was just doing a podcast interview, and they asked me, like, how do you not die alone? That was, the question. How do you not die alone? And I said, various tips of telling the truth and all the other things. But I said, one of the greatest gifts I've learned for myself is learning to see the world from my partner's eyes, to switch from my frame of reference and my relationship to integrity to Morgan's side and her level of integrity. And for me to be able to, I don't necessarily have to agree with it. I don't necessarily have to shift or change mine, but it's just an advantage to see how she sees something. Then I'm like, if I was in her shoes and, Rob was doing to me in her shoes, that would feel shitty. Okay, do I want her to feel shitty? No. What can I do by choice to enable her to feel safer and fuller and richer? And that's an ongoing, nonstop conversation. But if I'm not willing to look at things from her shoes, if I'm stoically, stubbornly sitting in my own frame of reference, I'm missing out on so much.
Yep.
Yep.
And I know, I totally agree with that. And what's been probably the biggest learning place for me is moving into open relationship with my primary partner, because it can be such a gray area. And what's been really challenging to my ego are the places where I'm terrified of being in the wrong. And that terror of being in the wrong has actually made it really difficult for me at times to hear my partner's perspective, because there's this fear that if I get their perspective, then I have to take culpability, and then I'll be wrong, and then I'll be a horrible human being, and then I won't be loved.
Well, that's pure ego, right?
I know.
That's your ego protecting you. I mean, remember, the ego is there to protect you. That's the role of the ego. So when we're younger and we need protection, we build ego structures to ensure that we're safe. The issue is when those ego structures become unmalleable or rigid, and we actually put them in our shadow, we won't see them. And then all of a sudden, your partner has a different opinion. You go, I am wrong, because your ego is protecting you, which then makes them wrong. And all of a sudden, that's where the disconnection occurs. And so I don't want to sound like I know exactly how to do this, because I am still learning. Just last Saturday, I saw this whole perspective of my relationship with Morgan, how it can improve if I just change my intention around it. And it's changing my intention just to be more connected. And I was like, holy cow, and all these dominoes fell because I click, 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 click. The point is I don't need my ego to protect me for being right, because I'd rather be connected than I'd rather be right at this state of my point. But it wasn't always like that. Sometimes I would be in arguments, arguing a point, even though they were full of shit, just because I wanted to be right. And the cost of that is so big in terms of intimacy.
Yeah, it's huge. And it is that piece around intimacy. I feel like so much of intimacy is a felt experience. You can actually feel close to someone in your body versus just being like, oh, I'm intimate with you. And there's this nauseating honesty, this kind of nauseating willingness to be wrong and see another person's perspective that is deeply intimate. And I find that the more we're willing to kind of lean in and let go of being perfect so that we can be connected, we wind up creating this deep anchor of intimacy with the partner or partners in our lives that really create the freedom for us to have the experiences that we desire, because our partner knows that we're willing to be connected over needing to be right.
Yeah, you speak it. Yeah, and so even the word wrong, let's look at that for a second. That has such a negative connotation. I was wrong, you were wrong, we did this wrong. Well, to me, I subbed in the word optimized. It's not the most optimized solution, or it's not the most pristine, whatever word comforts you or has you. Because I know my relationship with Morgan, or relationship with my work, or relationship with myself, it's a fluid, evolving thing. And what's proper in right now might be unoptimized in 10 seconds. It's my ability to say, okay, I want to make this better. I want this to be more sensational. I want this to be richer. What changes do I get to make to have a deeper intimacy with my partner? But if I'm in that, oh, I did this wrong, I screwed it up, I fucked this up, I'm laying on the floor, falling out of a yoga pose, moaning, bleeding, snot everywhere, and I'm just sitting there, I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Well, meanwhile, life is passing us by, and we're losing the opportunity to get your ass up and optimize it.
Yeah. Well, what that brings up for me is that it is impossible to be in authentic integrity with oneself if we're fulfilling someone else's ideas of what partnership is supposed to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so much of the time I find that when I'm asking people, like, well, why did you do that? Like, why did you say that? Why did you choose that? It's like, oh, well, because that's what you're supposed to do, or that's what my parents did, or that's what I feel like I was supposed to do. And it comes down to this question of, like, so when we release all of the shoulds, like, what is actually true for us in that moment?
Mm-hmm.
And I forget what actually brought me on this tangent, but it's like being present. Like, actually being willing to be present with who we are and what we want and what we need in the moment.
Right. And most of us aren't honest with ourselves. Okay, I'll grin and bear it. Or I won't tell him the truth because of his ego. Or, we're having such a good time. Why should I bring up that thing that he does that annoys me? Why should I ruin a good moment? But that's where you lose your integrity. Masculine and feminine is when you aren't willing to bring what's inside out.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a good piece, especially around expressing challenging emotions. Like, I know for myself, expressing my anger in the moment has been a really hard spot for me.
Why?
And because I received the conditioning from my relationship with my father that if I expressed like emotions that in any way challenged his adequateness as a father, that I'd be made wrong.
That's pretty good self-awareness. I like that. Good job.
Thank
Good
you.
job. Yeah, very
Thank
nice.
you. I
Very nice.
appreciate that.
Good job, yeah.
So I brought that into a lot of my relationships with men. It's like, this primary male person in my life from a very young age just kind of like invalidated my emotional experience. So a big part of my healing has been realizing that, like, my emotions are actually a gift in my relationships and actually can be a source of turn on and connection in a way where I felt like, oh, like the right thing to do is to hold back my anger because I don't want to hurt this person. But especially in my current partnership, it's actually the moments where I let myself get angry and just like let him feel what's true for me in the moment. It's like where the real turn on occurs and where the real intimacy occurs.
Totally. I mean, well, think about the math of that for a second. You feel anger in your system. You then judge that the anger is wrong. So you push the anger down, which, is the cancer. That causes the sickness when you push that anger down. And then you're totally out of integrity because you're not expressing what's happening on your inside. Meanwhile, your partner is thinking, if he's semi-awake, what's going on? Nothing. And then you probably say nothing in a passive aggressive way. And he's like, if he's a little more awake, he'll be like, are you sure something seems afoot? Nothing. Everything is fine. And then what happens is you get that disconnection. So you're actually harming the relationship just because you have a doubt about your own anger.
Yes. That.
Yeah. And I hold both people responsible for that. If I don't create a space for Morgan to have all her feelings, I hold her responsible in terms of her not being in integrity and authentic with me. I hold myself responsible because I haven't created a space for her to have her feelings. And so it's the combination. It's not her fault for being stingy with her reel, and it's not me for being an asshole. It's the marriage of the two. And so the greatest gift you can give your partner is like, please show me all of you. And the greatest gift you can give someone is showing them all of you.
Well, the piece you just said around like how does a man create a space for a person, or like how does anyone create a space energetic, because so much of it is energetic. Like there's what we say, and then there's the energy and the emotions behind what we say. And I feel like that in itself is an entire conversation of how do we really create an energetic safe space for a person to feel like it's safe to be all of who we are.
Well, that's a lot of self-validation. That's a lot of self-belief and self-love. I've worked very hard to create a space where Morgan can tell me everything and anything. And there's still times where she'll say something and I'll get triggered and I'll go into my childhood wound. I'll go into my, and she'll feel my trigger, and then she'll get triggered by my trigger. Then I'll get triggered by her, and so it happens. And what happens, what we've done in our 2.5-year relationship is we've learned and communicated what's the best way to say things.
Yeah.
And overtly, it's like, when this happens, how should I handle it? Do you want me just to say? Do you want me to sit down? Do you want me to say, truth moment? We have this game, hashtag truth moment, what is it? And to build those communication pathways, because we're not taught how to do that. We're taught to withhold our intimacy. We're told to withhold our feelings. And that's where the lack of integrity happens. And that's why most relationships either A, fail, more relationships fail than succeed. There's more single adults now than there are people in relationship for the first time in history. It's because we're not willing to create the pathways so we can fully be in integrity and transparent.
Part of me is almost happy that there are more single people than people in partnership, because I find so many people in partnership these days aren't actually joyful and like real and being themselves in partnership. So my initial inclination was like, thank fucking God people aren't pretending. Right. I mean, it could go either way, but that was my initial inclination.
Well, my belief system, it's going to be a mess for a while. And so I did this podcast with these two awesome people, and they do speed rounds. And they're like, what's one truth about you that no one agrees with? And I said, I think it's great that Donald Trump is president. And they were like, what? Like I could feel the agitation. They're like, I don't know if we can publish. Like my whole show was probably going to be fucked up just because I said that truth. And afterwards they said, why'd you say that? And I said, because all this mess has been underneath the surface forever. And I think the Harvey Weinsteins, the conversation about Me Too was created by him being in a place to let the pus, the muck, the dirt of our relationship to arise so we can actually work it out, so we can actually have healthier relationships, be more in integrity, be more transparent. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's going to be a mess for a while, and I do see form of beautiful resolution down the line, but it honestly could take a generation to get there.
Well, I'm glad we're here doing the work now, Rob.
Yeah, we've got jobs. We've got job security.
We've got job security.
Yeah, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Well, I don't know why I'm feeling the desire to be vulnerable, but let's just get into, I'm going to share a real world example of like a recent experience around like opening up my relationship and like masculine and feminine integrity, like in its prime.
Speak it.
Okay, cool. So my partner David and I have been together on and off for about 2.5 years, and we came back together and started like negotiating our like how we engage in open relationship with other people and what the agreements are.
Okay.
And we had decided that like, okay, so if we feel like something's going to happen, we'll send a text and let the person know, and we don't need to ask for permission. Because like if we're kind of waiting to hear back from the person, it could get in the way of actually natural organic unfoldment of the experience.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like updating the person.
Okay.
And oh my God, this is super vulnerable. Fuck. Okay, cool. So let's see. I had the experience of going out to dinner with a lover. Or a potential lover, someone who I hadn't explored physical intimacy with. And my current partner was at like a party, working an event or something like that. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to have like a conversation with him. And after this man and I parted ways from dinner, he wound up reaching out, and we decided that we were going to like get together and play. And there was this moment where I was like, fuck, like there's been choppy communication between my partner and I in the past about me telling him something and then not receiving info from him, and me going into this like fear spiral. So in that moment, I decided, you know what, I would much rather tell him about this experience in person so that I can actually feel him and he can feel me and I can see his reaction. So I went, had this experience. We didn't have sex, but we played around. And then me and my partner came back together. And when I was talking to a girlfriend of mine about this, I was like, girl, like, I am having this anxiety. I want to find the right time to talk to him about this. And she's like, well, like, why don't you wait until he's like in a good space where he can actually receive this? And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, she gets it. And she does the open relating lifestyle as well. And when I finally told him, he was really upset.
Yeah.
Because there was something that we had agreed upon,
yeah,
which in the moment I actually felt like a lot of nausea around and a desire to like share it in a more connected way. So I took it upon myself to act in feminine integrity and find when we could actually have a conversation in person. But I realized that not operating in masculine integrity there fucked with him and created less trust. Whereas I thought that there would be more trust because we could actually have a conversation in person. And I would
have been pissed.
Yeah, I believe that. And like in retrospect, like I totally get that.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is obviously a break of a masculine integrity. How do you feel, or how do you know, or how do you perceive it's in feminine integrity, what you did?
Because in my mind at the time, like one, I was afraid of receiving the cold shoulder from him. Like there was this fear of being made wrong for the choice, and that the fear of being made wrong would impact my ability to have this experience with this person, which has been, from my perspective, an issue in the past.
Okay.
However, what also plays in is the whole like having approval for my desires, which, oh boy, Rob, we are getting into some territory right now.
Yes, we are.
Getting into some territory right now.
Getting a little thick in here.
It's getting thick in here, and I'm not going to get foggy because I could just get into a whole foggy thing right now. But like ultimately, it was a fear of not being received in the way that I was communicating a truth. And I wanted to create a situation where I felt like I could be received in the emotions that would arise, which felt in integrity at the time.
Boy, it's like if I had a little character, like a little, I wish we could animate this a little bit, because then I'd have the masculine integrity, like laughing, like a barrel laugh at that. And that's a bunch of crap, just like, oh my God, does that work? Like just vomiting in ridiculousness. Anyway, so okay, I understand. So the masculine hated that, but I'll speak on the other second animation character, which will be the feminine integrity, which will be much prettier. Basically, like I think what happened was you wanted to go with what felt good.
Yeah.
And that's a feminine integrity, is it felt right to wait till you were face and face in a connected manner.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if we could break this down, it's like masculine is keep your word, feminine is keep your integrity around your feeling.
Yeah.
And boy, would they duke it out, my two cartoon characters.
Oh, it was very uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable.
It was very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And that's why I think a lot of arguments are based on that, like you broke your word. Well, it didn't feel good to keep my word anymore. Well, you can't not keep your word just because it doesn't feel good, and back and forth and back and forth. And it's a punching match. It's a war. It's a war.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Thank you for receiving that. That felt really good.
Oh, good.
And slightly nauseating. Just slightly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm more of a masculine integrity kind of guy, and it's really important to me that I keep my word to Morgan. I'm really anal on things. It's like, I'm going to be there at 5:15. Oh, I'm going to be late. She's like, how much later? I'm like 5:25. Like the 10 minutes make a big difference, but it does to me.
Mm.
And I also have an agreement with her. Like, she says, if you want to go do something, if it feels right, go do something, which I love. I love that freedom on the other side. So it's a war. It's interesting.
Mm. I wanna check in. We have about 10 minutes left. We have a couple people on the line. I'm curious if there's anyone who desires to bring their voice into the room about anything we've spoken to this evening, whether it's a question or something you've noticed or an insight you've gleaned. You're welcome to unmute yourself and speak your feminine truth.
Or masculine truth.
Or masculine truth.
Or a combination of the two.
Yeah, all is welcome and permissible.
I'll have to edit this so they say no, because this will be, or maybe the masculine integrity doesn't keep it, but it doesn't feel good. I'm very confused.
That was a very cute dialogue back and forth. Oh, whoa, all these people just hopped on. Okay, so going once, going twice, sold to no one.
No one and everyone. Okay.
And everyone.
All right, so...
Any parting words for you, Ken? Oh, God, I just called you Ken. I talked to Ken Blackman earlier today.
We look alike. We're like, he's a handsome man.
Yes. Rob.
My parting words is be willing to slide from masculine, feminine to feminine integrity. From one side or the other. Just be willing, and you don't lose out. You actually can gain so much intimacy and connection. Neither one is right, and neither one is really better. We have our biases. We have biases of if we say this, then blah, 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 and that's okay too. But be willing to expand and know when to shift and when to connect. And that's where, to me, the greatest intimacy, the greatest sex, the greatest relating is when you get off your box, your soapbox, get off your soapbox, step down on the ground, walk to the other side, take a look, see if it's more optimized, and then feel. I think that's where the deepest connection is. That's my sermon for today on top of my soapbox. Beautiful.
I love it. And mine is, if you're someone who's a perfectionist like me, do your best to acknowledge that there is no perfect walk in this way, that we are inevitably going to, quote unquote, make mistakes. We're going to inevitably impact people in ways that perhaps were less optimized than if we could again. And that we have to learn these lessons in some way in relationship. And if we don't learn it now, we'll probably learn it down the road in a bigger and perhaps not so better way. So how can we actually celebrate these things that we learn and come back into communication and connection and create more intimacy so we're more optimized in it? I really like that term, optimized.
Yep.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for everyone who tuned in. This will be made available for all those who could not tune in live to hear the recording.
Yep.
We'll be back next Monday, November 20th, for another vulnerable conversation between a woman and a man.
I think we should go Facebook Live in addition to the Zoom.
Cool. I'm down with that.
I'll set that up.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right.
Bye.
Till then, later.